Let's talk about restaurant slavery. Now, this is a topic I'm very heated about. Probably abnormally heated about. Probably something that I don't need to be this heated about. But I am. Because it roused me. So I was in in this Discord, the Part of the Problem Discord, which I know some people who are watching are part of. There's famously been this debate between me and a couple other people in the Discord about the idea of restaurant slavery. And what this came from was, calling out religion in a sense and saying like, hey, like, Christianity bolstered slavery and like God condoned slavery, even instructs people how to have slaves. And somebody, they made the claim that it was like, well, the reason people were enslaved was to pay off their debts. And I kind of was like, I'm just like, that's crazy and abhorrent. Like in any like modern day setting, I feel like that would be awful, right? Wrong. But the scenario that was played out, I don't remember if it was me or someone else that me or someone else who brought this up. It's like, if you go into a restaurant, they serve you with the expectation that you're going to pay at the end. You eat your food. It's a sit-down restaurant. And you don't pay. That then the owner of the restaurant has a moral right to take you at gunpoint or in other words, force you against your will to go to the back and wash dishes in order to make up for the pay for your meal. Now, it's actually really funny. I saw this like a month ago. I saw this movie clip where this exact same thing played out, where this guy went into a diner, ate the food because he was starving, and the lady was like talking to him about his life, and he was like honest. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I just haven't eaten in a couple days and I really need some food. And she looks back and they're like talking, and she's like, is there anything you can do? And she looks back and sees the single dishwasher back there like struggling and yelling and all that, and she just turns back to him and says, can you do the dishes? And I was like, oh my god, this is there's some things that like come up in your feed that's like, someone's listening to me, man. Like someone knows that like this is gonna fucking get me. It's pretty hilarious. And it cut at that point, so I don't actually know what the context was of like, did he? If I were to guess, I would assume that he went and did some dishes, right? But the difference between that scenario and the scenario that I'm talking about is there's some volunteerism, right? Like you got a meal that you couldn't pay for. And I think most people in that situation would genuinely feel bad about it. Like they would be like in a situation where like they are truly desperate. It's like the reason like why like, starving people steal, right? Like that's morally wrong, but there is this like animal thing where it's like, I need to feed myself. Or like family members, or like I need to have that, even if I don't have any means possible for that. But there's something voluntary about that, right? It's like, okay, like I feel bad for not doing this, so I'm going to, offer my services up to pay for it, because like morally this doesn't sit right with me. And I think most of the time, just like with the Donut Homestead thing, like people are going to do the right thing. I think if I was in that situation, I would maybe do the same thing. Like, hey, is there anything I could do in order to make up for the fact that I could not give you capital for this meal? However, that is not the situation that I am painting, which is that you are forcing someone into that scenario. Now, I think a big part of this argument is the idea that like there's a certain amount of capital attached to the meal, and then there's a certain amount of capital that's attached to the hours that you work or the service that you do for doing dishes, right? The problem is that none of this is a one-to-one. It's all subjective. If I owned a grocery store, I could, there's a certain cost of the apple, right? And then there's like a certain cost that I set to sell the apple. And there's probably things factored in that. The amount of money I need to be able to pay my employees and keep the place afloat and pay for water and electricity and all that. Like, all that could be factored into the new price that I give for the apple when I sell it. However, it is not a given that I am going to sell my apple based on that. I could buy an apple from a manufacturer for $1.50 a pop, and I could charge them $2 a pop. But what's to stop me from charging them $4 a pop? Now, obviously, there's, I think in the free market, you would kind of just naturally find like, oh, hey, I can't, like, nobody's going to buy my apple for $4, so I'm going to bring it down to $2 or $2.50 or whatever, right? Like, sure, that happens, but in a one-to-one exchange, there's no like real barrier there. There's no real constraint there. So like, and this kind of goes back to like the idea of, and I think this kind of plays into it a little bit too, like the idea of like justice. Excuse me, which is like I quote Dave Smith. It's just a fancy word for revenge at the end of the day. And like, okay, like let's say someone shoots a family member of mine. Someone shoots my dog. Makes me very sad, very upset. And I think in my mind, okay, well, since this happened to me, I'm going to go shoot their dog and kill their dog. Now, although that may feel emotionally satisfying, there's no real, how do I phrase this? There's no real mechanism to like equate that. Like, me killing that dog is not going to bring my dog back. My dog's dead, no matter what. No matter if I leave it alone, no matter if I go out in the world and kill 50 dogs. Like, my dog is still dead. And I think similarly to the restaurant slavery scenario, when you give somebody a meal, and we'll get to that in a second. When you give somebody your meal, that meal's gone. Now, you can set a charge for the capital, but it's a lot different than like if someone steals $20 from me and I use the minimal amount of force possible to steal back that $20, that is a one-to-one exchange because that's capital. It's not digested. It's not like gone like a life, right? Like it's still there. The value is still there. That's what's so great about capital. But is not the same as you give somebody a meal at a price that you've arbitrarily set. Essentially, you can argue like, oh, there's a certain price differentiation to this, but there's no outside mechanism that's ensuring that you are just going to sell at that price. Same like what I just said with the Apple example. And then there's arbitrariness in like what you pay your employees. You could underpay your employees. You could pay your employees way more than what the task is worth because you respect them, right? Like if you have an employee that just starts out, they might make $7.25. If they're there for a couple years, they might make $12. So I mean, my point with that is like you are setting the standard. So you being the owner, the person who is holding the gun to the person that you decide to give a meal without taking capital first, that's on you. I don't care what social standard or mechanism there is for saying like, oh, hey, if you come in and you get a meal that you say you're going to pay for and then you can't pay for, that I have no blame for that. It's like, I hate to quote him, but there's like this Ben Shapiro analogy that I actually really liked where he says, like, if you go down an alley and you hold up $100 and wave it around and scream, I have $100, and somebody robs you, like, the person that robbed you, there's still fault to that. Like, that person still robbed you, and that's still wrong. However, there's still partial fault on you for being a fucking dumbass and waving around $100. Like, both of those things can be true. And I think in this scenario, it's very similar. And there are business models that combat this. There's drive-through. Like, there is an actual market response to the idea that if you have a product that you want to sell, that it's going to make more sense for you to take that product, like, to get the money for that product before you give it to them. Like, that is how it works in every industry ever, except this sit-down dining thing. Because it's just this, like, social construct that, like, oh, if I sit down, it's going to be a nice experience. And I just don't give a shit. Like, sorry. What I care about is morals and logic and how things actually play out in the real world. These are the things I care about. So if someone doesn't pay for your meal, somebody's like, hey, like the situation I was just lying out in the movie, like, hey, I can't do this. And your response is, okay, I'm going to force you to do something for me in order to arbitrarily make up for the fact that you took a meal from me. Now, that's not... Look, if you wanted to say maybe have him make you a meal and then bring it back, that's a better argument. That's at least a better argument. But it is not a one-to-one to say, you consumed a meal that I'm not going to be able to get back, so therefore I'm going to force you or hold you at gunpoint to go wash dishes in exchange for that. This just is not... This is not a one-to-one. And then, once you, like in any other scenario, like let's say you want like a sex slave. And so you go to a woman, and you point her at gunpoint, and you say, hey, you are now my slave. I now have power over you. It's in my mind is the same thing. It is the same thing. The only difference is justification, and it's an emotional one at best. And once you are the person in power, once you are the person that is exerting power over this individual who has done this, who has taken money from you, not money, taken food from you, it's really on you to determine when that they have done that. And you're relying on that person, the person who's holding the gun, you're relying on them to be fair in that. And if you're willing to agree to that, like if you're willing to concede that, like, yeah, that's fair, then why aren't you pro-government? Because that's the exact same thing. That's like the entire purpose of the court system, is we're going to make this fair. We're going to have justice. So if you consider yourself like an anarchist or an anarcho-capitalist, but you agree with that model, then you're a hypocrite. End of story. There's no mechanism in place for me to say, okay, well, I'm holding you at gunpoint to do dishes to make up for the meal that you couldn't pay for. There's no mechanism for that to be an hour, for that to be a day, for that to be a year, because you have the power. You are the one holding the guns. Once you have committed the act of holding them to gunpoint, it's game over. You are now empowering, you now have power over another person, which is the exact same idea of indentured servitude in biblical times. It was all arbitrary. It was the idea of, oh, this person can't pay me or did something or whatever, and now I'm going to arbitrarily have what in my mind seems just and moral this time frame in order to make up for that, which has no real constraint, which has no real world expectation or whatever, or anything like that. It's simply just what you feel. Same with the dog scenario. Someone shoots my dog, I'm going to go shoot their dog. You shooting another dog is not going to bring you back. You holding somebody at gunpoint and forcing them to do dishes is not going to give you your meal back. That's just how it is.